Some people, no matter how hard they work, will never truly be given.
I'm trying to make God interesting to somebody that may say, you know what, I wasn't raised in church and I don't believe in any of that stuff. So that's kind of I feel like my calling is to, throw this wide net out there. And so that's what we do.
Welcome to the Vanderbloemen Leadership Podcast, where we talk about how to build, run, and keep a great team. I'm your host, Holly Tate. And on today's episode, William talks with Pastor Joel Osteen, pastor of Lakewood Church and the most watched inspirational figure in America. In today's episode, William and Pastor Joel talk about pastoral succession, staying focused on what God has called you to, and his latest book, The Power of I Am. Be sure to tweet your takeaways with us using the hashtag Vandercast for your chance to win a free copy of Pastor Joel's new book. That's hashtag Vandercast. Without further ado, here's Pastor Joel and William.
Well, Joel, I'm so glad and frankly honored that you'd come on our podcast. You've got to be the busiest pastor in America. Tell me, where were you last week?
Well, I was here last week in Houston at my church, but we do travel a lot. But William, I'm honored to see you again. And just I think back to those times when you pastored here at First Pres, and you were always so kind to us and came over during our grand opening. Just got a great history, and you have a great heart to help people. That's why I know God's continued to bless you, and your business is so blessed.
Well, thanks. And I've got to tell you, for those of you who don't know, Joel and his family really ministered to me in a season where I was in a little bit of a valley. And you can say whatever you want about theology this, theology that. I'll tell you what theology wins. Niceness and love and kindness and encouragement trumps a lot of other theology out there, because we got listeners from all over the theological spectrum, but I think everybody could learn something from you and your ministry, Joel. It really is a remarkable witness.
Well, thanks, William. We do. I feel like the ministry started back in 1959 with my dad, and the church at that time was called an oasis of love, and it was my parents' heart to just to love everybody, to accept them no matter who they were, and I felt like that was growing up. That's how I was growing up. Taught growing up. And not that I'm the best, but we do believe in helping lift people. I feel like life has pushed people down, and our ministry in general is, I feel like I'm called to throw a wide net of hope. I realize I'm not necessarily discipling every person. You can't do that in a 30-minute broadcast necessarily, but I'm trying to make God interesting to somebody that may say, you know what, I wasn't raised in church and I don't believe in any of that stuff. So that's kind of I feel like my calling is to, throw this wide net out there. And so that's what we do.
Well, and I love that at the end of every broadcast I've ever heard, there's always hey, go get in a local church. Yeah. So you're helping a lot of our listeners, just getting them interested.
Well, I believe in that, because we are a local church, and I encourage them to get in that Bible-based church. I pray a simple prayer of salvation at the end. Again, it's something simple, but again, I feel like my role in it is to get somebody interested that we're not interested in. Really, William, and cut me off here if I'm not talking about what you want to.
No,
but
that's fine.
When my dad died in 1999, I stepped up to pastor the church. I used to play basketball for years at the Post Oak YMCA, and a lot of those guys, they were rough. They weren't believers. They a lot of cursing, a lot of fighting. But I realized when my dad died, at one point, I would be on the television program because I was speaking at the church, and my dad had that program. I thought, well, these guys, they're going to see me up there. They may know my dad's a preacher in town, but they don't know much about me. But I thought, when they hear me, I want to make sure they understand what I'm saying, that I don't talk in so many religious terms that they think, I can't even understand you. So I made an effort to say, these guys that I play basketball with, when they hear my sermon, are they going to understand me? Are they going to get something out of it? And that was sort of a filter that went through my mind, because I knew they were going to see me and say, hey, man, I didn't know you were a preacher, man. But and I think it really helped me to be broad and to reach out, because I think sometimes, especially growing up in church, it's easy to just, talk in church language and, assume everybody knows things. But I like to just assume, nobody knows anything. How can I touch their heart?
Well, I've heard it said a lot of different ways. What is it? If you want to attract people like Jesus did, you better hang out with the same people that Jesus did.
Yeah, that's interesting. Absolutely. I feel like that. It's easy to just preach to the church all the time, and that sounds like maybe not a good statement, because we should disciple and teach and all that. But everybody's called to different things, and even with my dad, he was more of a traditional pastor than I am. I realize, and I take the heat for it, but from both sides, I'm not as traditional. But I've always had the desire is to get outside the church wall. So we air our broadcast on secular networks, the NBC, ABC, things like that. And I don't know, even going to some of these stadiums like we go to and outside venues, other than churches. Some people won't go to a church, but again, they'll come to a stadium. They'll come to a basketball arena, things like that. And again, I think, William, I've been good at running my race because there's distractions on every side. There's, when my dad died, it's, I got to be like my dad. He's been here for 40 years, and here's what he did. Here's what he believed in. And you got this other side saying, try to be like this. And at one point, I realized, I'm gonna fulfill what I believe is in my heart. And in my heart, William, I've always been a positive, a upbeat person, an encouraging type person. Somebody asked me, well, why did you decide to have this, positive, hopeful message? I thought, well, you know what? It's just who I am. And I think when I really stepped into that, and, first 6 months I tried to preach my dad's messages, and I did my best, but you know what? I just felt that pressure to be like my dad, because these people have been here for 40 years. But, when I really took that step of faith and said, God, I'm going to be who you called me to be. I may not use as many scriptures as my dad. I may not have a perfect title like he did, but I'm going to talk about life. I'm going to encourage people. I'm going to try to lift people up. When I really stepped into who I felt God made me to be, that's when the church began to grow.
That's awesome. That's a good word for listeners out there, whether you're a pastor or a church leader. So many times guys get distracted. I talk to them and say, what's your favorite book? And the answer is the one they just finished. They're going to try a new thing every time they go to a conference, and I know as we've grown as a business helping churches, I go back to a pretty smart woman for consulting, and she just keeps saying, keep doing what you're doing. Don't get distracted by anything on the left or right. Keep driving this. God's using it to grow it. And I think a lot of pastors would benefit from hearing that word. I
think so, because it's so easy to get distracted, and you think, oh, my friend's doing better, and he's got more members, and this is popular there. But I don't know. We're not perfect, but I think I have been, if I do have one, characteristic that's good, and that is focus. And there's been a lot of other opportunities. There's, a lot of, debate and criticism and this and that. But, I just keep plowing ahead. And when you're in your sweet spot, I say this, when you can get up every morning and search your heart and make sure you're doing what God's called you to do, then you can be at peace. And that's what I do every morning. I spend the first half hour and say, God, am I doing it for the right motives? Am I where I believe I'm supposed to be? And, here's the thing too, William, if I miss it, let me just take it to me. If I miss it, I'm going to miss it with a heart toward God. And I don't see how God can, I don't think God will, he'll judge us all, but I think it'll be a different sense when you say, God, this is what I believe deep in my heart, what I was supposed to do. And that's when I felt the most peace in his blessings.
That's awesome. Now, most of our listeners know we wrote a book a year ago. It's called Next, Pastoral Succession That Works. There are thousands and thousands of churches where the guy comes in after a founding pastor and it just doesn't work. And a lot of times it doesn't work because they try to do things differently. You followed a founding pastor. I mean, it was your dad, but in some ways that makes it harder, not easier. So what were some of the things that you did to help usher the church into a new way of doing things without blowing the whole place up? Yeah,
it was interesting, William. My dad was unusual in that he didn't have necessarily a succession plan in place. He's old school. He preached every service, never took a vacation, just that was his life. And my dad died when he was 77 from a heart attack, and we were naive. We thought my dad would live to 150 years old. But, I think one thing I did was I didn't change anything for, I was going to say several years. I mean, we did make changes, but I was very good about, let me say this, my dad being in the 70s, a lot of the staff were older too, or at least the key staff. And I thought, I'm 36 years old, and some of my dad's key players are 60s and 70s and even older. And I thought, God, I gotta I got to have people I can relate to. And what I did, and a lot of this was in a volunteer area as well, like, the head of like our prayer team and greeters, they were just older people, great people that I'd grown up with. But we brought in another younger team up under them, and we let them be the honorary leaders of that volunteer ministry. Basically said, guys, you've been here for 30 or 40 years. Mentor these younger people so we can take it to the, so we can pass that on. So I feel like we were very good at honoring the people that had been there. Didn't change anything drastically, at the start. But the services were much longer then. My dad coming out of that charismatic Pentecostal, sometimes the service would be 2 and 3 hours, and it's just, our generation is just too long. So we had to go to more services because the crowd grew. So that was a nice way for me to say it's got to come down to about 90 minutes without getting. But I don't know. We just I just took it. I say like this. I took it like it was a ship. You turn a ship. We turned it very slowly. I thought there were times Victoria said, "Oh, Joel, you got to fix this. This is not right," or not right, but not what should, not our vision. But I said, Victoria, let's just go slow. Let's just take it a little time, over time. When you do that, God, I believe He makes those crooked places straight. And so I went probably slower than faster, and I thought it, to me it all worked here.
Well, one thing that I saw that I've always believed is if you honor the past, your future is going to be honored. Yeah. And doesn't mean having to do things the same way every time. But when I moved here to come pastor the church, visited a lot of churches, and y'all were one of them. And you were showing a video about moving to the new building, and there was a baton pass in the video. You probably don't remember all that.
I do. It
was the most honoring of what had happened before and hopeful about what's going to happen. And I think a lot of guys out there forget that it's not, the world's changing faster than ever. It's easy to just go after a bright, shiny object, but look back to your church's past, and you'll probably find some places you can honor that will open doors.
That's so good, William. I'm a big believer in that. And even to this day, I still talk about my dad a lot because, he was such a big part of my life. But, boy, you just never go wrong by honoring, the people that have served. And just, even if you don't, like you said it, even if you don't, you didn't say this, but even if you didn't agree 100% with everything, and I did with my dad, but I know pastors have taken over churches, and you know what, they didn't do things right and certain things, and I'm not talking about ethical stuff, just, maybe doctrine or some different things, but boy, you just never go wrong when you honor people.
That's right. Now, you I get the privilege of coming and visit every now and then and see y'all, and I go to churches all over the world. I've never been welcomed more thoroughly in a church than when I go to Lakewood Church. I mean, from the minute my car hits the parking deck to the time I'm sitting down, everybody praying for me and encouraging. What do you as a leader do to sort of breed that into your staff and your volunteers? So what could pastors learn about how to create that kind of culture?
William, it's interesting. I think it does start with the leaders, and it's the way my parents were. And it just raised up people like that. And I think when it's friendly from the pulpit, when it's honoring there and uplifting, it just feeds back through. But I don't know. One word we use, my father used it, and we still do. It's unqualified courtesy. Mm-hmm. And we just that goes through our volunteers. And you know what? Hey, people are more important than the rules. If somebody wants to sit in this section, or if they want to go this way, and I don't know. It's just. I just think it comes from the platform, and it just you breed it in your people that people are the most important thing. I mean, it's interesting because Lakewood's so diverse. I mean, you have just all different groups of people. And one lady said not long ago, she told Victoria, she said, "I like to come to church because I like to come to Lakewood because that's the only time during the week I'm going to get hugged." I mean, you just never know who's there. So we just try to encourage people. You can be a miracle in somebody's life today. So
awesome.
we just we put that out there, and it's funny because when we moved to the Compact Center, I mean, that's a big building, 20,000 seats or whatever it is, 16,000 seats, and it's we thought, well, we're coming from this church where we grew up and all. Is it going to be the same? But I encouraged everybody, the people is what make the church. It's not the building. And so, man, we came over there on the first Sunday. I thought, this feels like home. It's just people love each other. They lift up each other. Somebody can come, tattoos in shorts, sitting by a CEO next to them. But I feel like it's what heaven's supposed to be.
I think it's a pretty good picture. Now, you've got a book coming out. It's coming out in October. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the book and Just give us kind of a preview.
Yeah, William, it's called The Power of I Am, and called it 2 Words That Can Change Your Life Today. That's my subtitle, but the thought is it's not necessarily talking about God being the great I am. It's talking about whatever follows the words I am, I say will eventually come looking for you. And let me explain it. If you go around saying, you know what, I am slow, I'm unattractive, I am unlucky, I believe you're just inviting the negative in. But when you say I am blessed, I am healthy, I am strong, you're inviting strength and blessing and health. And so it's part of our core message of be positive toward yourself, listen to what you're saying, and when you say I am, you're describing, you're inviting that into your life. So that's sort of the start. And then I go through, I think I have 17 I ams. I am blessed, I am restored, I am valuable, I am redeemed, I am forgiven. And so I teach messages on those as well, just, the different things. It feels good to me.
That's great. That's great. Now, you've been doing, I've gone to one of them, Night of Hope. Tell us what a Night of Hope is, and tell us about your most recent one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, William, we've been doing that since about 2004. A Night of Hope is an event we do in a baseball arena or a basketball arena or a baseball stadium. We do 12 a year, once a month, and it's an opportunity for us to go out and invite people that may not, like I said earlier, go to a church service. So these people watch us on TV or listen to us on the radio, and just a time that we can come connect. And so it's 2.5 hours. Victoria comes, and my wife Victoria, she shares, I share. There's some music. My mom shares how she overcame from cancer. And so it's not really a church service because it's geared toward people that don't come to church. We used to have, 15 minutes of praise and worship, and everybody just sits there and watches because they weren't raised like us. They don't know that, hey, you can join in and sing. So we geared it a little bit different. So we only planned on doing 3, and we've done 155. We've never stopped because the people continue to come. And we just were in the AT&T Park where the San Francisco Giants play, and the place was sold out there. And people said, you're not going to go to San Francisco and get anybody. But
not exactly the Bible Belt.
No, it's not. But I don't brag on us. I'm bragging on what the Lord is doing. But the message He's given us. I never dreamed I'd be doing this, but He's somehow there's a bit of message that connects with people. And the core message, William, is that God is good, that He's forgiven your sins, that you can live a blessed, happy, abundant life. Doesn't mean people say, well, Joel, you say they're not going to have problems. No, it's not. That's not it. It's in the difficult times, God will give you the strength to make it through as well. So I really, the Scripture says it's the goodness of God that leads people to repentance. At the end of those stadium events, 80% of the people will stand up to either rededicate their life to Christ or to take a stand for the first time. And so I just feel amazed at what's happening. Again, never planned on doing this. That's why it's easy for me to give God the credit. I don't have to take any because I was happy working behind the scenes running the camera.
Oh, that's funny. So when you're out looking at all of the churches that you get to see, you're with networks of pastors all the time, do you sense God moving in particular ways? Like what's going on out there right now? What's He using in a really vibrant way?
I don't know if I think of one thing specifically, but I just I see pastors just honoring God and continuing to reach people in great ways. And so I don't know if I see one thing specific, but maybe a bigger statement are the churches and ministries that are changing with the times, not changing the message. We all believe in Jesus, but it's not the day of my dad's from 40 years ago. So certain things have to change. The music, maybe some style, maybe the short, the length of the services and stuff. But I don't think we're not changing the message. But I don't know. It seems like those churches are growing. It's maybe some of the, some that refuse to change, maybe just strict, stay so traditional. It seems like they're having less and less influence.
Yeah, well, the media seems to pick up on church numbers declining. I couldn't be more optimistic about where the church is headed right now. I just see God moving, big churches getting bigger, smaller churches finding a niche that they can dial into, and I think that we're not getting the whole story when we read about church going down.
I do too. I get, people give me a hard time because I say I think it's the greatest day of faith in America. I just, never would you dream. There's, we're in Houston, Texas. There's probably half a dozen churches that have 10,000 people or more. I mean,
That's right.
I mean, I grew up in the church, my dad's church had 90 people, and had 200 people for 13 years, and then it started to grow. But I look at it to think about, okay, we're in a basketball arena. I mean, yesterday when we had our Sunday service, got 15,000 people in a service. I think, what is this day that we're living in? It's just a day that walls have come down.
Yes.
See, that was part of my dad's original core message was, bring down the denominational walls, because, he was strong Baptist, and, he wanted, my dad dreamed of the day we're living in today. I mean, at our services, not just ours, I mean, there's Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, atheists, people that don't, that's the day that, I don't know. So it's a great day to be alive.
Well, I think, and I've said this in a number of venues, that the big kingdom breakthroughs, like the every 500 years, right?
Yeah.
They always happen right after a communication breakthrough. You got, Rome builds roads, Paul plants churches. Alexander takes over the world. There's one Greek language. We get a New Testament canonized. Printing press happens. Martin Luther puts a Bible in everybody's hand. And now we're sitting here, and I think right after we're done, you're going to go on Sirius XM. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the day of the technology, that's a great way to look at it. I've never thought about that. But the day we're living in, I think, even back when, Billy Graham's day, there were 3 or 4 TV stations and stuff. I mean, today, every one of us can have our own network through the social media and through the internet. And it just still amazes me this, we send out, millions of daily devotional emails every day. And I thought, what a day to live in, to be able to touch people like that. And, well, I don't have to tell you, and all these pastors know it too, but just the way you can stream your services and watch on the phone and all that, wow.
Absolutely. And I believe that we won't be judged so much on whether we get our method absolutely precisely right as much as we'll be judged on whether or not we're trying to do something.
Yeah.
Because I do think that, if the Lord hadn't come back in 500 years, they'll look back at this time and say, that was a really special zone where you could reach people.
I know. What a day to live in, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Sirius XM. This has been a big move for you guys in the last year or so.
Yeah, again, William, I just stand amazed at what God has done. We've done a lot of television and, social media, things like that, but never done radio, and never really had that big desire I never really wanted to be on just a minister after a minister after a minister, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's really not who I'm reaching. But long story short, the guys up at Sirius invited us they wanted us 5 years ago to put together a Christian channel. I said, that's just really not us. Well, this last time, a couple years ago, they said, how about we give you your own channel? We just wanted to call it Joel Osteen Radio and run your messages all day. And you know what? It was just one of those doors that God opened up. And so we've been doing that we started in September of 2014, and I'd never dreamed the response. And so it goes into 30 million homes every day, or cars mainly. And so they run my messages, 48 altar calls a day on Sirius.
Wow.
And
wow.
We've been had a tremendous response, and Sirius is very proud. And the beauty is, to me, again, we don't just get our channel, but they promote us through every other avenue, because they have space on all the Today Show and the music channels and all that. So that's part of the beauty, is getting out there into the culture. And what really did it is some of the key players that run Sirius were, I think they were Jewish, I'm not sure, but they watch every Sunday. Never dream, CEOs and things like that. But again, they wouldn't consider themselves religious, but they like the message, and it's just, again, planting that seed in people's hearts, and they opened the channel for us.
So we're nearing the end of our time together. I wanted to ask you, there's nobody better at finding encouragement and speaking encouragement. A lot of people that are listening are pastors. They're listening on Monday, maybe Tuesday, and Monday is the day that's the busiest at our office. We get more people saying, I'm ready to quit. I'm ready. I'm out of here. Let me give you a resume. And is there a word when you have one of those days? Even Joel Osteen comes home some days tired. What do you do? What well do you go to for encouragement, or what word would you speak over these pastors?
Yeah, I would just speak, pastors. I don't know how I can encourage them, because what a fantastic job they're doing. But I just remember, as you run your race, I think you just have to stay focused on the fact that you're doing what God's called you to do, and you can't compare yourself, and you can't beat yourself up because your message you didn't think was good enough yesterday. So I get up every day, William, and just take time to thank God for what He's given me. And so I just, again, I don't want to sound trite, but the scripture talks about don't despise the day of small beginnings. And I think sometimes we look and, well, I'm not growing as fast as this one, or I don't feel like I'm making as big an impact. But you know what? When you're doing what God's called you to do, you gotta encourage yourself and know that He's pleased. And so just keep moving forward.
That's awesome. And so we always end our show with a couple of questions. We always want to know, what are America's best pastors reading? What's something you're reading right now? It could be fun or leadership or anything.
William, I skim a lot of books. So I don't know if I have specific ones. I don't have anything specific. I'm probably skimming a dozen books right now.
Wow.
But just, skimming them for material. And, people give me books, to a lot of books too. But I love to keep putting, like any pastor, you got to keep putting things in, finding those stories and those thoughts. So I don't have one, the funny thing that I'm probably reading, I read a couple chapters last night, is a guy that was at my church Sunday. His name is, I don't know his last name, is Ted, but he's called the Golden Voice. He was the homeless man that was discovered a few years ago and went all over the world and stuff. So he sent me his life story, and it was intriguing. But I like stories like that because I'll turn that around and maybe tell it sometime. Because here's a guy that was, at the depths of, didn't look like he had any future. Somebody heard him on the street corner, and the next morning he said, I was on the Today Show, and he said, Joel, I didn't have a comb, I didn't have a coat, I didn't even know hardly knew what the Today Show was. But anyway, I love those stories. That's
awesome. And I'm gonna see if you can tap into your gift of prophecy. Houston Rockets, how are we going to do next year?
I hope we're going to, maybe my gift of prayer would be better. I hope we're going to do good. Yeah, I hope we're going to do good. It's fun to watch.
It's more fun than it's been in the last few years.
I know, I'm telling you, it's great. And look at the Astros even pulling through.
I'm saying that maybe the Texans can even get past 8-8. Who knows?
I'm telling you, I hope so.
Yeah. Finally, one fun thing that we ask every pastor that comes on here, and we get a whole lot of answers. Pastors, we mess up in worship every now and then. We don't get it right. We're human. And I just said, what's a time that you just kind of, I didn't do that right in worship? Would you share one with people?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if I have a good one, William. My biggest thing is just remembering what I'm going to say, getting so nervous, especially early on. And I think one funny thing I was thinking about is when I first started, I was too nervous to eat on Sunday morning. I just, and my nerves were I was dreading it so bad. And so I wouldn't eat anything. And we'd do an 8:30 service. And by the time the 11 o'clock service came, there was this one service, I could not remember anything at 11 o'clock during my sermon. I got up there and I thought, I'm sorry, I can't remember what I was going to say. And anyway, I just, you feel like a total fool. But my brother talked to me afterwards. He said, Joel, are you eating anything? I said, no, I can't eat anything. He said, well, why don't you start eating? My brother's a medical doctor. He said, why don't you start eating because your brain is not working when you don't have any food. So I think that's about the worst I've done.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking time. I know you're just incredibly busy, and appreciate your ministry and what you're doing and the way you're out encouraging the world and pushing them toward the local church. Be sure and check out Joel's new book and find Joel Osteen Radio on Sirius. It will bless you. And thanks so much for tuning in with us today. We'll look forward to seeing you and hearing from you throughout the week. And tune in next week for another great show.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. Tweet your takeaways using the hashtag Vandercast for your chance to win a free copy of Pastor Joel's new book. That's hashtag Vandercast. See you next time.